The United Kingdom was the third country to test an independently developed nuclear weapon. In October 1952, it is one of the 5 nuclear weapon states under the NPT and a permanent member of the UN Security Council. Since the 1958 US-UK Mutual Defence Agreement, the United States and the United Kingdom have cooperated extensively on nuclear security matters. The special relationship between the two countries has involved the exchange of classified scientific data and materials such as plutonium. The UK is thought to retain a stockpile of around 225 thermonuclear warheads, of which 160 are operational, but has refused to declare the exact size of its arsenal. Since 1998, the Trident nuclear program has been the only operational nuclear weapons system in British service. The delivery system consists of 4 Vanguard-class submarines based at HMNB Clyde in Scotland. Each submarine is armed with up to 16 Trident II missiles, each carrying warheads in up to 8 MIRV re-entry vehicles, with at least one submarine always on patrol. The Vanguards perform a strategic deterrence role and are also believed to have a sub-strategic capability. In contrast with the other permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, the United Kingdom operates only a submarine-based delivery system, having decommissioned its tactical WE-177 free-fall bombs in 1998. The UK has not run a program to develop an independent delivery system since the cancellation of the Blue Streak in 1960. Instead, it has purchased US delivery systems for UK use, fitting them with warheads designed and manufactured by the UK's atomic weapons establishment and its predecessor. In 1974, a US proliferation report discussing British nuclear and missile development noted that, in many cases, it is based on technology received from the US and could not legitimately be passed on without US permission. The Atomic Weapons Establishment is undertaking research which is largely dedicated to providing new warheads, and on the 4th of December 2006, the then Prime Minister Tony Blair announced plans for a new class of nuclear missile submarines. Number of warheads. Current. Since 1969, the United Kingdom has always had at least one ballistic missile submarine on patrol, giving it a nuclear deterrent that is what the Defense Council described in 1980 as effectively invulnerable to preemptive attack. In the Strategic Defense Review published in July 1998, the government stated that once the Vanguard submarines became fully operational, it would maintain a stockpile of fewer than 200 operationally available warheads. The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute has estimated the figure as about 170, consisting of 144 deployed weapons plus an extra 15% as spares. At the same time, the UK government indicated that warheads are required to provide a necessary processing margin and for technical surveillance purposes were not included in the fewer than 200 figure, as recently declassified archived documents on Cheveline make clear. The 15% excess is normally intended to provide the necessary processing margin, and surveillance rounds do not contain any nuclear material, being completely inert. These surveillance rounds are used to monitor deterioration in the many non-nuclear components of the warhead, and are best compared with inert training rounds. The SIPRI figures correspond accurately with the official announcements and are likely to be the most accurate. The Natural Resources Defense Council speculates that a figure of 200 is accurate to within a few tens. In 2008, the National Audit Office stated that the UK stockpile was of fewer than 160 operationally available nuclear warheads. During a debate on the Queen's speech on the 26th of May 2010, Foreign Secretary William Hague reiterated that the UK has no more than 160 operationally available warheads, and announced that the total number will not exceed 225. Historical. Until the 1990s, the UK deployed a wide variety of nuclear weapons around the world, such as V-bombers in Singapore in the 1960s, aircraft on Cyprus and on Royal Navy carriers in the 1960s and 1970s. Until August 1998, the UK retained the WE-177 nuclear weapon manufactured in the mid-1960s to late 1970s, in air-dropped free full bomb and depth-charge versions. Its withdrawal left the 4 Vanguard-class submarines, which replaced the Polaris ones in the early 1990s, as Britain's only nuclear weapons platform. It has been estimated by the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists that the United Kingdom has built around 1,200 warheads since the first Hurricane device of 1952. In terms of number of warheads, the UK arsenal was at its maximum size of about 520 in the 1970s, but this figure does not include the large numbers of US-owned warheads, bombs, nuclear depth bombs supplied from US stocks in Europe for use by NATO allies. At its peak, these numbered 327 for the British Army of the Rhine in Germany alone. Weapons tests. The United Kingdom tested its first nuclear weapons in Australia during the 1950s, on the Montebello Islands and at the Woomera Prohibited Area. The first detonation, codenamed Operation Hurricane, occurred on the 3rd of October 1952 in a shallow bay on Tremorial Island. 2 further tests were held on the Montebello Islands during 1956. The second of these, codenamed G2, included the largest nuclear explosion in Australia, with a yield of 98 kilotons. 7 further nuclear tests were conducted on the Australian mainland between 1955 and 1963, within the Woomera Prohibited Area, at Emu Field and Maralinga in South Australia. The first British hydrogen bombs were tested during Operation Grapplet in Malden Island and Christmas Island in the Central Pacific Ocean. The operation consisted of 9 tests in the period 1957 to 1959, ultimately proving that the UK had developed thermonuclear weapons. Different sources give the total number of test explosions that the UK has conducted as either 44 or 45. The 24 tests from December 1962 onwards were in conjunction with the United States at the Nevada test site, with the final test being the Julian Bristol shot, which took place on the 26th of November, 1991. Because Britain did not test as often as the United States for financial and political reasons, and did not have the American state-of-the-art computer facilities, British weapons design depended more on theoretical understanding, with potential for both greater advances and greater risks between tests. The low number of UK tests is misleading when compared to the large number of tests carried out by the US, the Soviet Union, China, and especially France, because the UK has had extensive access to US test data, obviating the need for UK tests. An added factor is that many tests were for weapon effects tests not of the nuclear device itself but of the nuclear effects on hardened components designed to resist ABM attack. Numerous such effects tests were done in support of the Chevaline program especially, and there is some evidence that some were permitted for the French program to harden their RVs and warheads, because most French tests were under the ocean floor. Access to measure weapon effects was nearly impossible. An independent test program would have seen the UK numbers soar to French levels. The UK government signed the Partial Test Ban Treaty on 5 August 1963 along with the United States and the Soviet Union, which effectively restricted it to underground nuclear tests by outlawing testing in the atmosphere, underwater, or in outer space. The UK signed the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty on 24 September 1996 and ratified it on 6 April 1998, having passed the necessary legislation on 18 March 1998 as the Nuclear Explosions Act 1998. A series summary of British testing is shown here. United Kingdom's nuclear testing series. Note that the Vixen safety tests are not usually listed along with the real nuclear testing in lists of British tests. However, they are included in totals for US, USSR, Chinese and French testing. Their outcomes are not known, though they are for most other safety tests. Nuclear defense warning systems. The UK has relied on the Ballistic Missile Early Warning System and, in later years, Defense Support Programme satellites for warning of a nuclear attack. Both of these systems are owned and controlled by the United States, although the UK has joint control over UK-based systems. One of the 4 component radars for the BMEWS is based at RAF Fylingdales in North Yorkshire. In 2003, the UK government stated that it will consent to a request from the US to upgrade the radar at Fylingdales for use in the US National Missile Defense System. Nevertheless, missile defense is not currently a significant political issue within the UK. The ballistic missile threat is perceived to be less severe and consequently less of a priority than other threats to its security. Attack scenarios during the Cold War. A significant effort by government and academia was made to assess the effects of a nuclear attack on the UK. There were 4 major exercises. Exercise Inside Right took place on 6 to 26 October 1975. Exercise Scrum Half was conducted in 1978. Exercise Square Leg was conducted in 1980. The scenario involved around 130 warheads with a total yield of 205 megatons with an average of 1.5 megatons per bomb. The exercise was criticized as unrealistic as an actual exchange would be much larger, with one academic describing a 200 megaton attack as an extremely low figure and one which we find very difficult to take seriously, and did not include targets in inner London such as Whitehall. Even so, the effect of the limited attack in Square Leg was estimated to be 29 million dead and 6.4 million seriously injured. Exercise Hard Rock was a combined communications and civil defense exercise planned for September and October 1982. It assumed a conventional war in Europe lasting 2 to 3 days, during which the UK would be attacked with conventional weapons, then a limited nuclear exchange, with 54 nuclear warheads used against military targets in the UK. 250,000 people protested against the exercise and 24 councils refused to participate. The limited scenario still assumed casualties of 7.9 million dead and 5 million injured. The scenario was ridiculed by the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament and the exercise was postponed indefinitely. The New Statesman later claimed the Ministry of Defense insisted on having a veto over proposed targets in the exercise and several were removed to make them politically more acceptable. For example, the nuclear submarine base HMNB Clyde was removed from the target list. In the early 1980s it was thought an attack causing almost complete loss of life could be achieved with the use of less than 15% of the total nuclear yield available to the Soviets. Civil defense. During the Cold War, various governments developed civil defense programs aimed to prepare civilian and local government infrastructure for a nuclear strike on the UK. A series of 7 civil defense bulletin films were produced in 1964, and in the 1980s the most famous such program was probably the series of booklets and public information films entitled Protect and Survive. If the country was ever faced with an immediate threat of nuclear threat or complete annihilation, a copy of this booklet would be distributed to every household as part of a public information campaign which would include announcements on television and radio and in the press. The booklet has been designed for free and general distribution in that event. It is being placed on sale now for those who wish to know what they would be advised to do at such a time. The booklet contained information on building a nuclear refuge within a so-called fallout room at home, sanitation, limiting fire hazards, and descriptions of the audio signals for attack warning, fallout warning and all clear. It was anticipated that families might need to stay in the fallout room for up to 14 days after an attack almost without leaving it at all. The government also prepared a recorded announcement which was to have been broadcast by the BBC if a nuclear attack ever did occur. Sirens left over from the London Blitz during World War II were also to be used to warn the public. The system was mostly dismantled in 1993.